Elliott Abrams, thank you so much for sitting down with us here at I-24 News. I want to begin by asking you for your reaction to President Trump's speech last night to Congress.
I had a pretty positive reaction. I think the interesting question was comparing it to the inaugural address a month ago. And this was a much more, let's say, normal and presidential speech. Very little ad-libbing. He read the speech. The speech was in tone much more moderate, let's say. So I thought it suggested a kind of evolution toward, if you will, away from the campaign and toward being president.
You're here in Israel for the JPPI conference. One of the main topics is the spread of nationalism, both in the United States, beginning first in Europe. How do you think that's going to affect the Jews, Israel?
This is really the big question of the conference. I would warn against the idea that nationalism necessarily leads to a radical right politics. It did in Europe in the 30s. It never really did in the United States. We heard someone today speaking about Australia, very nationalistic, but also pro-Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has just been in Australia. I would say the same thing in Europe, that we need to worry about kind of radical right, what you might call traditional fascist parties. But there's positive nationalism too, the nationalism of Churchill, the nationalism of de Gaulle. And I think that certainly for the United States, it is possible to be a very nationalistic American Jew and a supporter of Israel. And so I don't find this something to worry about so much.
Even though often on the far right, we've seen an alarming rise in anti-Semitism, both in Europe and now in the United States.
I don't think there are any more anti-Semites than there were. I think the difference is they're kind of out of the closet. They did feel a kind of, I would argue, a kind of liberation in the Trump electoral victory. And they need to be put back in their closet. And the president beginning his speech with a mention of anti-Semitism is a very good start at doing that, because they need to be told basically, shut up. And if they do things like threaten Jewish centers, synagogues, schools, they need to be arrested. They need to be sent to jail. And I think that's something that the federal government, state and local governments need to pay attention to. I don't believe we're going to see a wave of anti-Semitic activity now. I think there was a moment, and we have to put an end to that moment.
Why do you think it took the president so long to speak out on anti-Semitism?
I really don't know, and I think it's a mistake on his part. And I think the mistake, he's begun to correct it. I think to him it's bizarre that he should be considered or accused of indifference to anti-Semitism, partly because he has put so many Jews in his administration at really high levels, and also, of course, because he has Jewish grandchildren, a Jewish daughter. So I think to him it seems crazy, but he's wrong, and he needs to do more and say more about it, and perhaps that speech suggests he gets it now.
Yeah, he's not likely a president that will actually come out and apologize, but maybe he'll just take steps
I think
in that
that's
direction.
I agree with that. I think that's exactly right. He doesn't like apologizing, but he may change.
Right. What more do you want him to do on the topic of trying to stem this tide of anti-Semitism in the United States?
The statement at the beginning of the big speech to Congress was very good. If there are more incidents, he's going to need to do that again and condemn them very forcefully. And it is a law enforcement question. If somebody puts a swastika on a wall, that's one thing. But to make a physical threat, that's a different thing. Well, I think the other thing we have to recognize is that there have been physical threats, and there has been physical action on a lot of campuses, and that comes from the left, and that's anti-Semitism too. And it's been mentioned at the JPPI conference. So I think it's a question for the federal government to think about. That's a matter of free speech in colleges. So there does need to be more attention to this.
Bringing this back to Israel and the Trump administration, when you look at the press conference that the president had with the Israeli prime minister, where it seemed that suddenly the model for peace was kind of thrown up in the air, and other topics, other models were maybe under consideration. What was your reaction to that? Do you think the administration is going to pull back to the two-state solution?
Well, we've had a statement from the UN ambassador saying, no, two-state solution. I was not critical of what the president said. I thought the meaning of it was, look, the goal is not the two-state solution. That's a means. The goal is peace. And we have failed to get it through Clinton, Bush, Obama, looking for conferences leading to the two-state solution. So maybe we try something new. And he did actually come up with a new strategy, this outside-in strategy of starting with the Arab states and trying to get them to help more. I think that couldn't have been done 10 or 20 years ago because Israeli-Arab state relations were so poor. They're better now. And I think it's sensible to try it. I'm still a skeptic, but I think it's a skeptical thing to try.
I want to ask you about something that was brought up at the conference this morning. When we think about President Trump and his personality, there is an issue of unpredictability. There were some people this morning at the conference saying that unpredictability actually could be an asset, because America seems, the criticism has been that America is kind of pulled out of the Middle East, and Trump here is asserting American power. We don't know what he'll do with it. Do you agree with that, or is unpredictability a danger in this region?
I think, first, engagement is critical, and I think several speakers said, talking to not just Israeli, but Arab, Asian, European leaders, there was a sense in the previous 8 years of the Obama presidency of disengagement, and that's bad. That's dangerous because it opens opportunities for Iran, for Putin, for others who are not friends of the United States or of Israel. The unpredictability, I think, can be useful. And the example I'd give is NATO. And the president said in his speech, that European countries are starting to actually pay more, that is, to spend more on defense. And so that moment of doubt about, well, what's his view of NATO, is going to have a positive impact. And last night he endorsed NATO fully and said, I think, the right thing. We're 100% for NATO, but everybody had got to do their fair share. I think we have seen less aggressive maneuvers, say, in the Persian Gulf by Iran since January 20th because they don't quite know what Trump will do. I would say the same thing about China and the South China Sea. That's positive. Of course, the uncertainty affects your friends and allies as well. They don't know what you're going to do, and you need to reassure them. It's a difficult balance to strike, but the unpredictability is not per se going to hurt the United States.